Because on each score of the policy interventions that we so badly need, COSATU's policy position is precisely the opposite of what we need for development and job creation in South Africa, and precisely the opposite of what is in the interests of poor, unemployed South Africans. And that is the tragedy. Let's look at the facts. Nearly 50% of workers in South Africa work in companies which employ fewer than 50 people. So let's klein besighede. Small business is the real driver. Small and medium business is the real driver of economic growth in South Africa. Now we have a system called central collective bargaining. And that means that what is bargained in COSATU's model of industrial bargaining, zero-sum game negotiation, in that particular model that COSATU supports, what is decided centrally for any industry applies across the board. So the wages and conditions of service that apply to big business also apply to the smallest startup in that industry. And that obviously is a huge disincentive to people to start and open small and medium businesses. It's a massive disincentive. Because while big business can usually easily absorb the conditions negotiated by COSATU for workers who are already employed, people are very unlikely to start businesses if the mountain seems so great that they don't believe they're going to be able to traverse it and meet the minimum conditions negotiated at central level and make a viable business of them. Every single finance minister since 1994, most notably Trevor Manuel, has said we've got to relax the labour regime. We've got to introduce labour market reforms. We've got to make them more flexible to the needs of different parts of the country. Do you remember the story about Newcastle? In Newcastle, in KwaZulu-Natal, a very depressed area where there is 60% unemployment, the local workers decided that they would be prepared to accept lower wages than that negotiated nationally by the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union. And that attracted a lot of investment and created a lot of jobs. But immediately, instead of encouraging people to get jobs, SACTU and the trade union movement moved in and sought to force the centrally bargaining agreements onto the factories in Newcastle, although the workers there said, please don't. It will cost us our jobs. Please do not do this. And COSATU insisted, and the factories closed down, and people lost their jobs. Now, secondly, with regard to the take-up of young people in the job market, the Democratic Alliance has always proposed, and we are delighted that the National Planning Commission and the Ministry of Finance now also supports a youth wage subsidy. Now, the youth wage subsidy is, in essence, a mass apprenticeship scheme which the government would subsidize to make it viable for employers to take on young workers without experience and train them for a range of jobs across the economy. And in fact, the National Treasury budgeted 5 billion rand for this proposal, which we strongly supported. And it was estimated that this would assist 430,000 young people to get a foot on the economic ladder. But COSATU has opposed the subsidy, has pushed it into NEDLAC, where it is just treading water and nothing is happening for a second year in a row. A 5 billion rand budget for a youth wage subsidy to get young people into the economy and being trained for productive jobs to get them out of a lifetime of unemployment. And the process is blocked by COSATU in the name of the workers. A bigger irony you couldn't get. Because we are in a global knowledge economy. And workers in Cape Town are not competing with workers in Pofadder. They're competing with workers in Beijing. They're competing with workers in Sao Paulo. They're competing with workers in Buenos Aires. They're competing with workers in Dublin and Seattle and across the entire globe. And unless we have skilled and educated workers, we're not going to make any progress in the global knowledge economy. 53,000 teachers went on strike on the eve of the matric exams. And in fact, at the beginning of this year, for the 6 weeks at the beginning of this year, Teachers were prepared to leave learners without any teaching as they went out on strike again for the first 6 weeks. And on Sunday, you would have read in the Sunday Times that many schools in the Eastern Cape still don't have their textbooks nearly halfway through the year. So this is a real crisis, which even if we do get the youth wage subsidy in, and all the other things we're arguing for, if people can't read, write and calculate, they can never get their foot into any part of the economy. Basic education is a sine qua non in this day and age for being able to get any kind of job. So we know that in this day and age in a knowledge economy, this kind of attitude, backed by COSATU, that has not once criticized the South African Democratic Teachers Union, this kind of attitude is what is going to keep people poor and unemployed forever. If you don't have skills, you can't get a job. Excellent teachers are seriously underpaid. Useless teachers are massively overpaid. And that is the problem in this country. I've just come back from Brazil, where I understand why the economy has grown like it has, because they have very different policies from ours on key issues. And their one key policy, which I'm enormously impressed by, is performance-based pay for teachers. And they base it on the outcomes of your learners against targets that have been set for those specific learners. So there's not one size fits all. It's targets against that school or that class's previous best, and teachers have to achieve improvements on the previous best, which is their target. And then it's on the number of days lost to teaching, and pupils report when their teachers don't come. So on the number of days lost and on performance in terms of outcomes, teachers get differential pay. And a good teacher in a scarce subject can earn up to 3 times the basic salary of a teacher through good performance and through good outcomes. Now that is the proposal that we support. So we will protect workers' rights to organize. We will certainly stand up very, very clearly and loudly for the rights of trade unions to organize, to exist, to bargain, and to do all the things that trade unions do around the world. It's part of a free and democratic society, but they mustn't claim to be more than that. And if they're trade unions, they mustn't try to govern the country when they didn't stand for election.